In today's video, we're checking out a product that has the potential to be pretty much one of the bargains of the century. But it comes with a few caveats, and there have been a whole load of questionable reviews about it floating around on the internet. And the product I'm talking about is none other than the ThinkRider PP5 power meter. Now these come from AliExpress, either as just a spider or as a full crank set, and they are crazy good value. Well, that's to say if they work. So for just a spider, you're talking about 75 to 80 pounds or around 100 US dollars, or you can get a complete crank set, either aluminium for around 120, 130 pounds, or the version I've got, which is carbon fiber and ultra light, coming in at about 200 to 250 pounds, depending on whether there's a deal on. I am well aware of everyone else on the internet's opinions of this power meter, especially that pretty scathing GP Llama review, but because it was so cheap, I had to try one for myself. So I got hold of two of these and threw them on both my road bike and my gravel bike, and pretty much used it to shadow my training for the past good few months now, dual recording wherever possible with both my turbo trainer, ASIOMAs, and recently Majin 715 power meter pedals. And boy have I got a lot of data for this review to dig through. I even ran this power meter alongside my brand new Majin P715s for an entire 3.5 hour UCI gravel race at the Gralloch last weekend. But let's get started by cracking a box open, seeing what it includes and getting it installed on the bike. Opening the tiny little box that the standalone power meter comes in, you can see in the box we've got some instructions, and then it is simply just the power meter and a charging cable. The power meter is weighing in at about 110 grams, so it's by no means the lightest power meter you can get, and it'll add around 50 grams or so to the weight of your crankset, assuming you're using a standard aluminium spider. It mounts using the standard race face cinch interface, which is really common, especially with these Chinese power meters, and a lot of these really lightweight cranksets these days are using them, such as the ever popular Elili or Cyber A cranks. And the charger's a nice simple USB Type A to a little proprietary charging pin. And despite me being a champion of not using proprietary plugs, this one is quite a generic one, and I've actually used both my XKD and Cospo charger on this power meter and it worked fine. So getting replacements, even if they stop making this model, is not going to be difficult. So onto my testing methodology. I didn't want to do just a controlled lab test on the turbo where I run through a set erg mode workout and compare the numbers with different power meters. Coming from the position of being a very competitive cyclist who races at a high level both on gravel and in hill climbs, I wanted to make sure this power meter suited my personal needs. So basically what I have done is allowed it to shadow, i.e. be recording in the background of all the training sessions I've been doing over the past couple of months. So alongside recording with my primary data gathering device, which was either my ASIOMA Duos, my newly purchased Majin P715s, and my Elite Diretto XR, I was also recording on my watch from this ThinkRider. Well, actually, most of the time it was this one, but that's irrelevant. And yeah, I've got an absolute monster suite of data, all comparing how these two power meters performed. I'm going to break it down like this. We're going to start with some early outdoor data, then jump into some turbo trainer, sort of more controlled environment data, and then we'll get into the spicy stuff when I've taken it out into real world races. So first up, on my first few rides, where I had the ThinkRider setup and my ASIOMAs, it was pretty much spot on out the gate. They were lining up really good, really nicely with less than 1% difference. And you would expect the difference to be really tight between a set of pedal-based power meters and a spider, as there's no sort of mechanical loss from a drivetrain between them. And yeah, the tracking was perfect and I didn't notice any drift throughout an activity, even really intense VO2 max sessions where I'm pushing well in excess of 350 watts. I also ran these on a lot of steady state kind of zone 2-esque rides and it was spot on as well there. And just to make things fair, I also ran these off-road in a gravel setup. So there's a lot of vibration, lots of stop-start pedaling. And as you can see in this activity, it was pretty much spot on as well. But that's where I had a bit of a problem. If you were watching my channel, around April, you'll have seen I had a pretty nasty crash on my gravel bike. And this data comes from the first half of that ride. On that ride, my pedals took a pretty heavy beating on the ground. And after that point, their data has been really wonky. So that is where the end of the Ferrero data comes from. And if you look at any of my other Ferrero data since then, it has always been massively under reading, with the left-right balance being completely out compared to other reference power meters I have. So from this point onwards, I started gathering a lot of data on the turbo, both with my gravel bike and my road bike. So from my turbo testing, I found there was around a 1 to 3% discrepancy, which sounds like a big range, but you've got to remember when I'm testing a power meter on the turbo, the power meter is measuring at my cranks, whereas the turbo is measuring at my back wheel. Now that means between one measurement and the other measurement, my power transfer has to go through my entire drivetrain, which can account for quite a lot of loss. And it is quite a variable amount of loss as well, as the bikes I'm using on the turbo are constantly being taken on and off, being used outside on gravel, getting dirty, and I'm not exactly the best at keeping my chain clean. So I'm pretty confident that difference was purely from the way my drivetrain was set up. And the real big part was the fact there was no drift from the start to the end of the activities. Whatever that offset was, it was pretty much rock solid the same throughout any individual session.
For example, over the whole of this Zwift race, the difference was just 1.32%. If you zoom in towards the start, you can see 1.4%. Zoom in towards the end, you can still see 1.4%, well within the margin for error.
And then things got a bit interesting because I eventually bit the bullet and decided to replace my old Ferreros, which were the only way I could get a dual recording outside. And I bought into some Magine P715s because I had a bit of credit on AliExpress and they were at a really good price on there. So yeah, I got the pedals, whacked them on the bike, and immediately, well, let's just say things were looking really good. They were pretty much bang on with the ThinkRider straight away out the box. As soon as I calibrated the machines, done the hard effort they recommended, yeah, it was pretty much perfect. And this is where we get into the most exciting piece of data I've got, which was when I ran both power meters at the Gralloch. Looking at the power file for the whole race, you can see the 2 meters were pretty much spot on in line with each other, with less than 1% difference. And when we zoom into specific sections where I was pedaling quite hard up climbs, you can see each one over and over again, they are all absolutely spot on solid. No matter how deep into the race it was, the 2 power meters lined up perfectly, which, considering the issues this power meter has been documented to have with drift, is really reassuring. And if it can avoid drifting in a 100+ kilometer UCI gravel race, I think it's pretty much earned its place on my bike. There was unfortunately one small moment where the data didn't line up perfectly, and that was when I was doing lots of stop-start pedaling going down descents. And I'm pretty certain where it's come from. If you look at the traces, you can see the machines are aggressively dropping to 0 whenever I'm coming off the gas, whereas the PP5 Spider isn't quite as quick, hitting down to 0 watts. Now, which one's wrong, I couldn't tell you. And also there is obviously a discrepancy between recording on my watch for my PP5 and on my head unit for my machines. And to be honest with you, as I said, I'm reviewing this from the perspective of a racer. I couldn't care less what my power was when I'm doing a bit of stop-start pedaling down a descent. When my power data has to be spot on, it's when I'm trying to make sure I'm in zone, up a climb, not going out too hard. Whether I'm doing 150 watts or 0 watts on a descent is completely irrelevant. And now we get on to the ThinkRider's absolute strong point, and that is value. If you go on AliExpress right now, you will find the ThinkRider on sale for anywhere between around 75 to 80 pounds. And with some coupon codes, it could be even cheaper. In contrast to that, pretty much the cheapest other power meter you can get on the market, which is the Magine PES515, will set you back £300. Or if you want a Quark, their Spiders can be had for around that sort of price as well. Just to note, that machine does come with a crankset. However, this is over 3 times the price of the ThinkRider, and the ThinkRider uses the cinch crank mounting standard, which is compatible with a whole number of different cranks, unlike Machine's proprietary standard. So yeah, given its price, I really find it hard not to recommend this ThinkRider power meter. There is one problem though that I have been overlooking to this point, and that is its sprint performance. Now, my weak climber legs definitely can't put out the sort of wattages needed to cause this drift, and to be honest with you, I don't sprint at all anyway. Very occasionally I need to put out a bit of a sprint at the end of a crit, but my style of racing is usually making a difference on climbs rather than in flat sprints. So I'm going to leave GP Llama to do the sprint testing, as he can clearly manage significantly more watts than me. And if you saw from his testing, he did manage to cause quite a bit of drift issues when doing absolute maximum sprints. Now, I honestly don't think this is too much of a problem. For over 90% of cyclists, your peak sprint power is completely irrelevant and definitely not something you need a power meter to help you with. Just think about it. In a race, when you're sprinting, have you ever really looked down at your head unit in order to pace a sprint? No, a sprint you're just going full gas, concentrating on keeping that power down in a straight line to the finish. The time you need a power meter is keeping them steady state efforts in check, whether that be training or racing, and that is what this PP5 is pretty much spot on for. There is one thing though I am going to be critical of ThinkRider for, is after this testing that has found it to be a bit flawed in sprint performance, I really think they should just own it and say, look, this is a cheap power meter, it is perfect for steady state riding, but be warned, it's not rated for sprints. Or just give it a wattage range of 0 to 800 watts, for example. Now, the other thing is, yes, this is a product of AliExpress. AliExpress isn't exactly the best regarded platform when it comes to returns. Who knows whether it's still going to be going strong after 6 months, after 5 years, or what. If you'd gone out and bought a Quark, it would probably come with a good warranty from a bike shop you could return it to if it developed issues down the line. But from what I've found, AliExpress products, whilst their initial returns are okay, down the line, like warranty style returns often aren't the easiest and generally don't really happen. But because it's so cheap, that's a risk I'm personally willing to take, and I'm sure a lot of other people are as well. So the bottom line for this review, and really what's inspired the title of this video, is no, it is not $100 rubbish. Is it the most reliable and accurate power meter in the world? Well, I certainly can't claim that, given all its issues with sprint performance. But what I can say confidently is, if it is the only way you have to get power meter on your bike for an affordable price, and it's this versus no power data, it is going to be perfectly good enough for any of your sort of zone 2 riding or even pacing up climbs, which is what the vast majority of people want a power meter for anyway. If you care about measuring your absolute all-out sprint, or you're a track sprinter, then maybe it's not for you. But if you are in them sort of niche markets, well, unfortunately, you're going to have to bite the bullet and spend a bit more money. If this power meter was only just undercutting the competition, maybe at $250, I would be a lot more skeptical. But because it is so much cheaper than anything else out there, aside from some of these other cheap Chinese ones that are starting to pop up on the market, I really think you can't go wrong with it. And some of the talk about it being rubbish online, I think is genuinely so overblown. And actually, I'm now confident using these as my primary training power device going forward. Now, I'm in a fortunate position where I have several power meters and I can cross-reference them. But I think at this point, most cyclists do have a turbo trainer. So every so often, you can just sanity check your power meter and make sure it's not massively changed versus your turbo. Just make sure you are considering the fact your drivetrain will have quite an impact in that discrepancy. So you will have to let me know in the comments, what do you think about this power meter, and do you think it's accurate enough for the sort of riding I'm doing? And do you agree with my take that, yeah, sprint power data isn't exactly the most important from the perspective of somebody who is actually racing? As much as I would love it to be spot on throughout the whole power range, especially given the price, yeah, well, I think what it is doing well is good enough for most people's racing needs. And on that note, I'm going to end this video there. If you're interested in any more super cheap cycling products, I have got a really exciting announcement. To celebrate hitting 10,000 subscribers, AliExpress have actually sponsored me to do a live stream, live unboxing some of their best-selling cycling products. So yeah, they've sent me an absolute mountain full of packages to unbox and show you guys and give my live reactions to. So if you want to catch that, it will be live at 9 p.m. on Monday the 1st of June. And in amongst that stream, I will be doing a live Q&A as well. So look out for a community post over the next few days where I'm going to be asking for any questions you want to get queued up for me to answer live on stream. And on that note, I will leave you all there and I'll see you all in the next one.